role, they do that again. You understand? For instance, just on that, with regard to this DA, it's about time they must leave that DA because they're playing a role of being an opposition party, not the part of government. So it's time for them to be chased away. They must chase away them. They must kick them out.
All right, Bonakele, let's leave it there. Bonakele out in Cape Town. So Bonakele argues that, men are raping because they can, because of how lax the state of, I suppose, the implementation of the country's laws is. Is there not more to it than that? It's being done just because it can happen? Is that really the reason why it's happening? Just because? The violation of minors is happening just because? Ronnie, you're in Malamulele. Good morning.
Good morning, Katie. How are you?
Good, Ronnie. Go for it.
All right. I'm on this issue of sponsorship funding because I think many of us will be fronted by the people who are currently running the sponsors, because what's worrying me more now in the villages, these people are taking over on the fish and chips business, the car wash, so we are left with nothing. I also fear that on this funding, majority of us are going to be forwarded and be their face, because we are left with nothing. Lastly, they have this rule that when their fellow has got a spaza, they must have like a distance away. But if it is a South African, they don't mind having it just front opposite of you, knowing that they're going to make you shut down. If they fail to do that, recently I've just read on news that one South African guy, in the end, his shop was banned because they wanted him to close. He never wanted to close. So finally, they just banned his shop. So my belief on the funding, I fear that most of us as blacks or as South Africans are going to be compromised, are going to be funded by the Ethiopians. This funding surely is not going to benefit us all. Thank you.
All right, Ronnie. Yeah, it's a concern that Ronnie is raising after the approval of, I believe, 500 million rand towards spaza shops and spaza shop owners. So we're now watching and waiting for a process where the disbursement of those funds is going to take place. From what I saw, Ronnie, it looks like a lot of the details haven't been fully fleshed out yet in terms of where these monies are going to go, but there's an allocation, it looks like, for spending on stock. Some of it might go to training of spaza shop owners and giving them some skills that they need to help them run more sustainable businesses. But one would think that the process of registering these businesses perhaps dealt partly with the concern that you have, Ronnie, that they will be fronting. Of course, if that process turns out to have been flawed, then the result is going to be exactly what you're concerned about. Jimmy, you're calling from Khobokwani. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
All is well. I want to talk about two things. Number one being the constitutional prerogative of the president to appoint certain heads of institutions. And number two, the electoral system. I think we need to review the prerogative of the president to appoint heads of Chapter 9 institutions. I think the reason why we see these institutions not performing to their best ability is because of they have been appointed by the president, who's the head of a political party. Now, these institutions, remember, they're independent. They must be autonomous, right? Now, there should be a neutral body that is comprised of maybe the retired judges and the academics who are going to appoint the heads of these institutions, all Chapter 9 institutions. What we are seeing in the NPA What you are seeing in the subs, the Scorpions, the Auditor General, all these Chapter 9 institutions, I think it shouldn't be the prerogative of the president.
So who would you say must appoint them, Jimmy? Parliament?
No, not Parliament.
Who?
It should be a neutral body comprises of retired judges and the academics, so that they can have the audacity to challenge leaders who are not performing accordingly. I'll give a practical example yesterday with the report of the public protector about the president, you see. So you can see that this person doesn't want to perform their job to the best of their ability because they've been hired by this individual. You remember there's an African adage that says, you cannot buy the hand that feeds you. But if these people were appointed by a neutral body, I'm telling you, and accounting to that particular neutral body, we are going to see different things in this country. But as long as it's still the prerogative of the president, believe you me, we're still going to see a mess.
All right, Jimmy, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to have to leave it there. Time for the latest news headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, Sergeant David Fortuin is expected to continue to testify in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha today. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Park Stau and the Minister of Small Business Development Stella Ndabeni will launch the R500 million Spaza Shop Support Fund in Soweto today. And the South African Policing Union says the 3-day police summit, which will start in Kempton Park, Ekurhuleni this morning, should not be another talk shop. The union says the summit should adopt practical resolutions. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
Begin with Buco, and you could hit the road with a brand new trailer. We're giving away 94 trailers nationwide, fully loaded with home building and maintenance supplies to fuel your next project, road trip, or business venture. Spend 1,000 Rand or more in store at Buco. Fill in your entry form and drop it in our competition box. It could be you. Shop, enter, and win with Buco. T's and C's online.
Buco. Who says talking never solves anything? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. It is your open line, your national roundtable. I'm taking your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. So one of the stories that we've been tracking is what is happening in the Northwest, in particular in the Dinokana area with regard to public transport there. Earlier this year in January, we received a call from one of our listeners, Tsepo, who said that people in the area were unable to get around due to the withdrawal of services. And these, it's a rural area, so already there's limited access to transport. In responding to that, the HOD in the Department of Transport in the Northwest then gave us a call and said this was an issue that they were responding to. So I want us to play back to what he had to say on the 28th of January, because just yesterday we got another call from Tsepo. It's been 3 months since, and there's still no change. They still don't have access to public transport, and this becomes the only form of transport that residents are able to use to get from point A to point B.
Tsepo must not feel that we are not taking him or his community serious. You have heard him himself. He's saying there are commuter forums, but now he's shifting the blame to say they're incompetent. You see, the issue I was saying, we are communicating, but the structures in the transport space that have been established by communities that we go through this structure. But we'll meet with Tsepo, and I want to meet Tsepo today, so that we don't go up and down on this matter. You are Producer must just send me Tsepo's number so that we close this matter. Tomorrow, we'll go and give you feedback on our discussion with Tsepo. Maybe he can also assist us on the ground.
So that was on the 28th of January. The HOD, Dr. Hans Gekana, promising to meet with Tsepo to hear the concerns of the community and also resolve the issue of the lack of public transport. Yesterday, Tsepo called in again on the open line to say there's been no progress.
On the 6th of February, we had a meeting with Dr. Gekana and the chief director and the director at the tribal office. And in that meeting, the HOD, together with the chief director, they promised Bogosi Barona in Dinokana that on the 1st of March 2025 or 1st of April 2025, there will be another provider on the ground replacing Atamelang. But to our surprise, today is the 7th. Nothing is happening. No one is telling us anything. What happened is that last week on the 1st of April, I called the department and they referred me to the chief director. She promised me that on the 7th, there will be buses on the ground. But this morning I WhatsApped her just to check with her if the situation is going to change. She said to me she's on her way to the office, but I don't trust them anymore. I just want to let the people of South Africa that they must know.
Tsepo, did they ever bring in an intervention as they had promised?
No, there's nothing. There's nothing, Kitty. That's why I've called you today, hoping that maybe Dr. Gekana will hear me and he will respond as he was saying he listened to SAFM.
All right. So Dr. Gekana is on the line. Dr. Gekana, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Morning, Cathy. Not a doctor, and I'm not Dr. Gekana. My name is Osheben Konyaditse. I'm the Director of Communications at the department. Dr. Gekana is unfortunately unavailable as he is attending other meetings.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. No, not a problem. Apologies for that. Unfortunate that he wasn't able to be available for this conversation because, of course, he was the one that made the commitment, right? But nonetheless, made it on behalf of the department. So 3 months on, why is it that we're still here, Oshebeng?
Yeah. First of all, Cathy, we do understand the plight of the communities. Maybe let me start here. The Atamelang bus service is not and was not the government-owned entity. It was a private entity which the department has contracted to provide service in the Ngakamuberumulema district. And over the period of time, it collapsed, I think, around December. And that's when the department began the process of looking for a replacement. At the times, the plans were that by the 1st of April, the bus service would be there. However, because of the due diligence that the department had to do to try and avoid challenges that were experienced before, that is why there was this regrettable delay. The processes that we had to undertake was first to ensure that the companies that have been shortlisted, from which one of them or maybe a couple of them would be in the panel to provide the service, had to be visited, physically visited. Some of them are outside the province, and we had to ensure that first the buses are not 5 years old, and importantly, the company would have adequate buses to provide service. We do once again regret that there was this delay. In terms of communications, the affected communities had been engaged. There is what is called the commuter forums. These commuter forums have been in conversations with the department. As per the clip that we have just played of Tsepo, before this interview, I spoke with the chief director, and the chief director had assured me that they had spoken with Tsepo. Even yesterday, they were WhatsApping each other to take Tsepo as the member of the commuter forums in confidence into how far
the point, Oshebeng, is not only about whether or not there's communication, but it's about whether there's follow through. And you say that you understand the plight of these communities, but actually you don't, right? Let's be honest, you don't. Because between January and now, there's been no step, there's been no intervention for these communities. This is also transport that is used as school transport for minors. No.
No, there is a service, a separate service for scholar transport. It's a separate service completely.
So then why are we getting calls from residents in your province in the very same area talking about how they're finding young kids who are hitchhiking to school on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. First of all, Cathy, before we become government officials, we are members of the communities. And therefore, what affects the community affects us as well. We do understand the plight of the communities. We do understand some of the challenges because it's not everyone and it's not in every village where there would be other forms of transport, public transport like taxis, for example. And we do understand that these buses are very important. But let me just clarify this, if you allow me. The reason why we will have to go through all these processes to ensure that we do everything by the book, so to speak, to ensure that whoever will be the service provider, one, will not have the same problems and challenges that the previous service provider had. Secondly, that the processes have been followed to ensure that no one will challenge them in court. Because if we rush processes, we also stand the risk of someone challenging the process.
So the point, I don't think that anybody from the community is saying don't do your job or don't do your due diligence. What I am saying to you this morning is that your understanding and even acknowledgement thereof means absolutely nothing to the people of Dinukana in this instance. Because as far as they're concerned, nothing has changed between January, when they first raised this issue, which has been ongoing from last year, to where we are now, where it is the 8th of April today, and nothing has changed. So this idea that you are a member of the community, you understand, well, maybe you don't actually understand. Do you have to rely on that public transport? Are you the one whose life is being inconvenienced by not being able to get around?
Maybe we're speaking past each other. What I'm saying is that because of the processes, that is why there was a delay. Initially,
and there was a commitment. Oshebeng, there was a commitment from Dr. Gekana that there would be some kind of intervention in place between then and now because of just how difficult it is to get transport in some of these areas. That was the commitment that was made.
Cathy, what I'm saying is that the Atamelang transport collapsed in December. In January, the processes began to look for an alternative transport. Now, because of the processes that the government had to undertake to ensure that they will do everything within the prescripts of the supply chain management processes, that is why there was this delay. However, because the initial plan was that the service will be in service by the 1st of April. Now, because of the due diligence that the department had to do, there was this regrettable delay. However, we are saying as a department, the service will be provided to then not only Uganda, but the entire district before the end of this month.
Okay. Oshebeng?
Yes, Cathy.
I don't know. The residents are going to have to decide if that's a good enough answer for them in terms of the commitment. But remember, it's a second time that a commitment is being made. And this is even before we get into the fact that even the failure of Atamelang to get to this point happened under the watch of the department. But in the meantime, you're saying that people must continue to do what they can, right?
No.
And I see that you haven't even answered on my question of the minors that are hitchhiking to school. You haven't responded to that either.
What we are saying is that there is a separate scholar transport paid for by the department that provides scholar transport services. We do understand that there could be other children who do not benefit from the scholar transport who might be using these buses. But what we are saying is that there was a delay. Was there a communication? Yes, there was a communication with the commuter forums. Was there a communication with...
It's not good enough.
Yes,
it's not good enough, Oshebeng. I'm saying that.
It will never be good enough.
No, you can't say that. You can't say it will never be good enough.
The fact remains
it's not your child that is standing in the street having to find a way to get to work. That is what the people in your area are going through, Oshebeng. It's not about being personal. This is personal for the people who are having to go through this every single day. It is absolutely personal for them.
Kathy,
the reality is that there has been no commitment.
You are being personal.
Oshebeng, there has been no commitment from the department to actually bring in any kind of intervention for this community, which is surprising because that's where the conversation was in January. In January, the conversation was about what happens while the department tries to remedy the situation. We're now in April, nothing has happened in that regard. Instead, there are delays in the due diligence process, which you, of course, are able to justify. But the point is that nothing has been done to assist the residents, which is who are the people that are feeling the greatest inconvenience here.
May I come through? May I reply to
Go ahead.
Right. What I'm saying is that if the department is not doing things correctly, Kathy, the very same process that we want to remedy could be challenged successfully in court.
But nobody's saying don't do things incorrectly, Oshebeng.
But
nobody's saying bypass process. There was a commitment. Okay, I'm going to try and be as basic as I can with this. The issue of people not having transport started towards the end of last year. It was raised on the show in January. When Dr. Hans Kekana came on, he said, we are aware and we are putting in intervention plans so that members of the community don't have to suffer the consequence of that. That was the commitment made in January. We are now in April. Nothing has been done to that effect. This is outside of the procurement process that the department now has to undergo.
Okay, Kathy. That intervention plan, any intervention plan had to be done through the SCM processes. You can't just go out and get a bus company to come and operate without following the due process. If you do that, you shall be contravening the SCM processes of government. You will be taken to court, and the same service that you will be so eager to put will be put in abeyance.
All right. So then maybe the issue is that the department should not be making promises that it knows it can't follow on.
The processes, so that those processes, you are not contravening the law.
So then the department should not be making promises that it knows it can't follow up on. It should have just said to the people that there'll be no transport between now and until such a time that we've appointed a new service provider. So make do with that what you will.
Even in that interview, Kathy, where you make a reference to Dr. Kegan, he said the service will be at the beginning of April. And now what we are saying is that
he said that the new service provider, Oshebeng, in between that, they were even holding meetings with local taxi forums and other stakeholders to see what kind of an intervention would be put in place. But I think you've made your point. We're going around in circles now. I'm going to end it here. That's Oshebeng Konyadidze. He's the Director of Communications in the Northwest Department of Community Safety and Transport. We're going to take a break. I'm back with more of your calls.
Can you hear that? It's the pitter-patter, letting you know your roof is leaking. Terrible timing. The sound you were hoping for is the splish-splash of the beach holiday you've been saving up for. But don't let cash flow hold you back. Do both. Apply for a Nedbank personal loan and get our best interest rate with a loan of up to 400,000 Rand. Apply online at nedbank.co.za. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
April is Freedom Month, a month to reflect, celebrate, and move forward. SAFM is bringing you powerful stories, insightful debates, and voices that shape our nation. Stay tuned to SAFM, where freedom, history, and the future meet. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, we continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Of course, we needed to bring you that response, right of reply from the Department of Community Safety and Transport in the Northwest on the issue of buses in the Dinokana area. Let's continue then with the open line. Sanele, you're calling from Durban. You want to pick up on the rape crisis.
Morning, Cathy. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Go for it.
Good, Cathy. Interview you've just had, maybe just a slight comment on it. Cathy, I think sometimes the problem lies with our officials. Maybe we put too much blame on the political wing. Yes, rightfully so, because they look after departments, municipalities, and state organs. But yeah, I think somehow the problem sometimes lies with officials. People often complain that the people that want hush money from in supply chain departments are not politicians, but are actually officials. And in some cases, we see the point in case with the SASSA money that was stolen. It was officials and no politician was involved. So maybe we do really need to put our officials in a microscope and really demand more accountability from them as public officials.
Look, and Sanele, the thing is that there must be an ability to inspire confidence, right?
Yes.
And to simply acknowledge something and to say that you understand, it's meaningless if that is not followed by requisite action. So between now and then, when this problem started, if people are complaining about it to the extent that they do, it means that they have nothing. And these are rural areas. There aren't that many options available to people. And that's why it's also important.
It's so sad, Cathy. It's really sad. On the second issue, Cathy, I think thank you for just highlighting the seriousness, not that it was never serious to begin with, but the stats that you've shared, I think they touch a nerve, or they bring a human element to this whole rape phenom in our country. I'm really unable to accept a notion that says if our justice system was stronger, then rape would be deterred. But I think it's really an issue of norms, an issue of principles, and an issue of morality. It really says a lot about us as a country if our moral fiber allows men to be perpetrators of rape merely because our justice system is not strong enough. Of late, we're talking about South Africa having the highest crime rate in terms of sexual violences. And at the same time, our constitution is lauded for being the best, supposedly, in the world. So there is that huge disconnect in our morality and in our laws. But over and above, no politician can sort out this issue. I think, really society must just delve into the reasons behind men being perpetrators of rape, the reasons behind the vulnerability of children at school who are supposed to be in a safe environment. But,
absolutely.
It's not correct. So I think it's a moral and social issue, and it's these issues that we should be discussing openly as men and as the so-called men's conference. These tangible issues that maybe might help in unearthing some of ukhohlakala and the bad values that we uphold as men in society.
Okay, Sanele, thanks for that call, and for your contributions on the show. And Sanele is right. we've got to be able to confront what it is that this mirror is revealing to us about who we are, and then ask ourselves, well, why are we here? What led to us being here as a society? Because until we're willing to have that conversation, I fear that we're going to continually end up in the same place. Njabulo, you're in Durban. Good morning. You also want to talk about the rape crisis.
Morning, Sister. This rape crisis is something that is out of control, and I think we can take it back to breakdowns of societal structures. When we were brought up, we knew that you had a parent everywhere you went, and you didn't need to know them. You were looked after by everybody within the community. A child is a child, and it's everybody's child. Nowadays, children walk around and nobody wants to take responsibility for them. Nobody wants to be a part of it. Nobody wants to call someone into order. You watch children just going around themselves and unto themselves. Same as adults as well. You can't tell someone, you're wrong, stop what you're doing. You don't want to get involved when people are having domestic disputes because you're afraid of what will happen to you. And that breakdown in community, that it has led to this, quite frankly. And it's scary, and I wish we could go back to what we had. I wish we could go back to the times when we were told by random parents, it's late, go home. And if they beat you in the streets for doing wrong, your parents would accept it because it's another parent correcting you. It's another parent taking care of you. And that's what we require in the community. As for those adults who are perpetrating this, these uncles, these fathers, it is scary. It is scary. What is it that makes you want to be a predator to someone else's child? This is your child. This is you. So what is it that makes you objectify a child like that? Oh, man.
Yeah, Njabulo, I completely understand your frustration, and I think that this is a topic that we are going to intentionally be paying more attention to and trying to unpack and understand. Because it is a crisis. It has reached crisis levels, and it's happening everywhere where we are. There are no spaces that you can confidently point to and say, well, sexual abuse is not happening here. That is not, in fact, the case. But we have to shed light on it so that it begins to lose its power. It begins to lose its grip over our society. Anonymous, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Cathy. Thank you for taking
sir.
my call. I want to comment about the launch of the 500 million with the TTIC and the SITFA. In my Xhosa language, we would say, Oqam baya Patlulana. It means only fools are together. Why do I say these people are fools? But is that my name, we are a business that is based in township. And we work with 70 spaza shops, physical spaza shops, not just names. Because these people that have got 500 million, they've got just a name of spaza. That's a tagline, something that would pull the attention, but practicality won't reach the spaza shops. You can try to propose to these people, man. If you're not in that circle, you are outside, and they will take you to this. DTI is the West. DTI, they will speak about black industrialists. When you go there, they will tell you they took the money to NEF and they gave the money to IDC. They gave the money to SAFA. They will never give you a straight answer. I'm an entrepreneur for the past 13 years, and I've been funding spaza shops, and I've been trying to get to assist these businesses that some are operating for locals and foreigners. I deal with them. Some have been operating for the past 10 years without any form of what you call assistance. You can imagine if I've got what you call social media, I can follow what you call, I can listen on radio, I've got this information. How more difficult is it for the spaza that will be told 500 million when they try to access or get more information?
So, Anonymous,
they are sent from pillar to post.
In your very experienced view, briefly, because I've got to take the news now, where does the biggest problem lie?
The biggest problems, man, lies in all politicians. They can lie. They can lie, and what they can do is that they can give false hope.
Sure. All right. Anonymous, we'll leave it there out in Cape Town. It's time for the latest news.
In our top stories, Jocelyn Smith kidnapping trial continues and Spaza Shop Support Fund to be launched in Soweto. Good morning. Sergeant David Fortuin is continuing with his testimony in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha. The court has been hearing evidence in a trial within a trial to determine the admissibility of statements by accused Jacqueline Apollos and Stavino van Rijn. It also heard that Apollos confessed that they sold Jocelyn to a Sangoma. Apollos, Van Rijn and Jocelyn's mother, Kelly Smith, are on trial for her disappearance. This is what transpired yesterday when police officer Adrian Pretorius was under cross-examination.
You could have used the word electrician. You could have used the word cake baker. You could have used any occupation or anything. Why the word Sangoma?
My lord, the only explanation is because he told me that they sold the child. According to me, Sangoma says buying sold, my lord.
Earlier, the Rapid Response Team on Gender-Based Violence said perpetrators of sexual crimes were able to escape punishment due to legislative loopholes. This as the country faces an alarming increase in cases involving the rape of minors. The case of a 7-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted allegedly on school premises in the Eastern Cape sparked nationwide outrage. There are also renewed calls for urgent action to protect children, particularly in educational institutions. The team's chairperson, Dr. Nadia Benon, says courts are impeding efforts to support rape survivors.
Once the case goes to NPA, to our courts, all our mobilization, all the community support, standing with the families of the victims, it all goes into the wind because there's always a failure to support victims and survivors at the court. There's either no trace of DNA or the evidence is not enough to make arrests, and the perpetrators of sexual violence can see the gaps, watch the gaps, and know that the rape cases are an exhausting process. So that is why they take advantage of the system and continue.
Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Park Stau and the Minister of Small Business Development Stelanda Beni will launch the R500 million Spaza Shop Support Fund in Soweto today. The fund aims to support South African-owned township community convenience shops, including Spaza shops. The support entails the initial purchase of stock, upgrade of building infrastructure, refrigeration, shelving and security. The South African Municipal Workers Union, SAMU in the Eastern Cape, are expected to march to the Buffalo City Metro Municipality from North End to City Hall shortly. The action is over issues affecting the union members and the city. The aim is to highlight alleged financial mismanagement, corruption in the metro and breach of labour rights. The union says these issues negatively affect the delivery of basic services in the metro. SAMU's Provincial Secretary Asam Zantaka.
The bone of contention here is the attack on collective agreement, especially Section 84(1)(a) and 85 of Labour Relations, which talks about the consultation which has to happen between the management and Labour, which is not happening in Buffalo City. And some of the issues, one, it is the non-payment of the COVID and danger allowance, which is a long-standing issue, which they promised to pay at the time there was COVID. There was a policy, everything was fine, they promised to pay, but again, they come out to tell us stories that they don't have money now to pay, citing that the municipality is under a financial recovery plan.
And finally, a new report estimates that last year was the first time ever that more than 40% of the world's energy was generated without the need for fossil fuels. The report says a warming planet means more heat waves and more demand for electricity for cooling. The BBC's Jonah Fisher reports.
The amount of the world's electricity generated by solar panels continues to rise sharply to nearly 7% of global supply. China is at the forefront, with more than half of the rise taking place there. Wind power also continues to grow, while hydroelectric remains the world's largest single source of renewable energy. So a hot 2024 caused a rise in overall demand and a slight increase in the amount of fossil fuels used.
Recapping the top stories, Sergeant David Fortain is continuing with his testimony in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.2 FM in East London. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. It's 7 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show as we continue to lead conversations that move us. It is a Tuesday, so coming up later on in the hour, we'll of course be talking finance with Brian Hirsch, and we'll be looking at some of the shifts, the global shifts in the economy and trying to bring it down home, right? What does it mean for South Africa? But most importantly, what does it mean for you and I, right? If there's steps that we can take today to better cushion, better prepare ourselves for what lies ahead, well, that's exactly what we'll do. Thanks for all of the engagement in the open line of the show. Lots of your responses to different things that came up within that particular conversation. So we'll just play some of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line, and then we'll round it off getting into Brian's segment.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
If we're going to say government all the time, I'm sorry, Cathy, morning. We are going about this the wrong way. Parents have stopped being parents. Children should be under a parent's guard all the time. We should know the whereabouts of our children. Parents need to take responsibility. There are monsters. There will always be monsters in this world. We just need to be extra vigilant, especially now during the period of drug and alcohol abuse. Parents need to open their eyes. They must take responsibility. You can't go drinking and leave kids unattended.
Kids, in regard to violence and the rapings, we are no more getting worried about that, you see. And then we go for the expression by Churchill saying, when you go through hell, just go on through hell. Because our own government doesn't have deterrent measures against these criminals. You see, our neighboring countries, when you ask other guys from neighboring countries, they say in their countries there's no rubbish such as this, rapings and so on and so, because of the deterrent measures are very serious. So yeah, thank you, Willie here in Kuma.
Good morning. I am so tired. I think your show leaves me scarred every week. I don't know. I'm still surprised why, as citizens, we're still accepting this whole tender system, because clearly it doesn't work. Every time someone comes to the show to come and explain, they always tell us about processes, about going on to tender and whatnot. And we know there's a whole lot of manipulation that's happening in the background. I do not know why, with so many intellects, whether within the NC or government, we're not finding another system on how government can get service providers when it comes to such things, even big projects or small projects that inconvenience our lives.
Good morning, Cathy and team. This is Manuel from Western Cape. Thank you very much for being the voice of the voiceless. You are asking the right questions to this guy. He must be ashamed to be a representative of the government. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
That's good. Good morning, LB. My driver. That's good. You're not going to win that Ushabian guy. This Ushabian guy is very ignorant. As much as we made an example that Cathy is not a part of the people who are struggling or of the scholars that are struggling. Then he's telling that, no, you are being personal. You are not being personal, Rosenfeld. I think we South Africans, we need to choose wise our leaders. It's time to choose wise our leaders. It's time to stop being manipulated by being given food parcels for our food and so on. Thank you, Sis Cathy.
Cathy, wonderful show as ever. I hope you have a room you can go into and just scream, because I'm sure your frustration with these officials must really be off the Richter scale right now. And I don't blame you. It would be very difficult for me to sit still and listen to all this ducking and diving. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for what you do for us all. Bye.
EFC is live this Thursday. From the wilds of Reunion Island and the ancient lands of Zimbabwe, two raging bulls meet for a heavyweight title clash as Elvis Moyo takes on Anthony Morrell. Plus, Fahis Jacobs and Sibusiso Sovendile fight for bantamweight gold. EFC 122, live from the World Sports Betting Arena. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
A very good morning, Brian Hirsch. You've come today, but I see you forgot the sunshine.
No, well, how can I have sunshine in the dungeon? I mean, Cathy, 31 years ago, my first program was broadcast from the studio. And let me tell you, it is so complicated to get to the studio. And, I think it took me a week to get out. They found me wandering around a week later to let me out of the dungeon.
Brian, the glass can't always be half empty, okay?
No, the glass...
It must be half full.
Yeah, well,
so this time it's half full. Why? Because you don't have to walk all those flights of stairs.
I came down one flight.
Exactly.
Yes, okay.
So it's half full. Yeah. Yes, we are somewhat... Brian says that we're in a dungeon, but it's not really a dungeon. We're just in studios that are on basement 2 at the SABC, right? So it does take some travailing and traversing to get to where we
Cathy,
are.
I must say I've been off for 2 weeks. Thank you to Sandy for standing in for me. Picked up pneumonia, I don't know how and from where. Fortunately, didn't end up in hospital, but I had to have bloods every day, which I went to the doctor and I'm right through it and pretty well. And if I have to cough, I know our controller will just take me off air for a moment. Apologise to all those people. I've never, ever prepared a talk and not been able to do it. And so the talk that I was giving on the 25th of March has been put forward. It's this afternoon. It's called Spirit of Youth. The money I make, will it work for me one day? Where am I in the investment world? I'm doing a webinar. If you still want to participate, please send me a WhatsApp on www.bhca, www.bhca, and we'll send you an invite to join. It's 3:30 this afternoon. probably about an hour and a quarter, hoping to answer many, many questions that people have put to me over the years. We welcome you. It's an initiative that Cathy and I put together when the children matriculated in January and got their results, as well as other kids graduating. So it may not be entirely for the elder of our listeners, but certainly for your children, for your grandchildren, and for young people. I promise you they won't be disappointed. And maybe if you learn just a little bit from something in what I've got to say this afternoon, www.bhca.co.za, just send a note saying, I'd like to participate, and we'll send you the link.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Brian. And I'm certainly looking forward to that session. So this afternoon, 3:30, the Spirit of Youth Financial Seminar. So, Brian Hirsch, I mean, you didn't bring the sunshine, and it doesn't rain, but it pours. At least that's what it also feels like where the global economy is concerned. Last night I spent quite a bit of time just, reading and seeing what's going on globally. Everywhere, every international publication is talking about these U.S. tariffs and the impact that they're likely to have on the global economy. And these are not conversations that are sort of happening very far away from us. We've also been affected. But this segment is about how you and I, as ordinary South Africans, are affected. Because already I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, what does this mean for our personal finances? Surely somewhere down the line, there is going to be some kind of impact. So help us make sense of that trickle-down effect.
So, Cathy, let's go back in time. This is the current financial stress on the world. But the financial stresses on the world since 1940, and I'm going to the start of the Second World War, when Germany invaded France in 1940, that's 85 years ago, we've had 16 major events of a similar type, stressful. Going back to the last one was COVID. When you think about it, we closed the country off. People weren't working. Businesses were closing. And what was going to happen? And that was global. Let me put it in this way. The tariffs is created by one man. COVID was not one man. Then we go back to 2008, when nearly 25 to 30% of the banks collapsed in the world when there was the financial crisis. We go back to 2000, when there was a collapse of technology, when the technology markets had run. We go back to the oil embargoes. We go back to all things that have happened. And so there are two stresses that come about. The first is what I call the emotive feeling about what's happening. And emotively, people are, as you say, what's going to happen to our finances, what's going to happen. But the rating of that compared to COVID, compared to the crash of the world markets in 2008, 1997, 1987, is really nothing compared to those. So people are getting themselves into a terrible state because of one word, and that is recession. And I'll deal with that in a moment. So there's the emotive side, which people are putting at a 10 out of 10 when they shouldn't. And then there's the economics impact, which people are, economically, how will it affect companies going forward? How will it affect American companies? How will it affect technology companies? I mean, if you saw what's happened to our markets in the last 10 days, particularly last week, we had a complete crash in our, commodities are not at all included in any tariffs, but the commodity markets came off 10 to 12%. Platinum crashed because the feeling is maybe in the world there's going to be a slowdown. But I think people are getting absolutely paranoid. If you talk to the supporters of Trump, they are convinced that what Trump's doing will sort itself out into the future. I think Trump has now played his last card, and I think he's now going to have to be talking to all the different countries how they do it. I mean, one of the big advantages for South Africa exporting to America was the treaty under AGOA. And although AGOA still exists as a treaty, it's due for renewal in September, Trump's taken away all the benefits of AGOA by putting the 30% tariff on wine, on automotives, on citrus foods and textiles, all that. But, whilst we export to America, I think it's $14 billion. It's not that there's certain areas, if you think about it, if you take wine, only 4% of our wine exports goes to America. We're going to have to find other markets. So In the short term, it's had a major impact. What's even been bigger on South Africa is the disagreement at the Government of National Unity voting for the budget. And that's the biggest problem. And that's why our rand has been affected, because foreigners are now concerned if the Government of National Unity falls to pieces, what is next? And you saw what happened last week. Despite the EFF, despite the Inkatha and the DA moving out, the government in power, ANC, was still able to get a majority from the smaller Herman Mashaba, Action SA, the PA, and various other parties who supported him. That's given the ANC a little bit maybe more of false confidence that they can go without all these parties. You know, a splint, you can't, if you have the smallest party can control government, you can't have that happening. I mean, you've got that in Israel, where you've got the religious party controlling government. So you can't have the smallest party controlling government. So they're going to, we hope, and if they sort out the Government of National Unity, we're waiting, and there's discussions going at the moment, I think you'll find our rand recovery. The good news for South Africa is the oil price has come down. The oil price has come down from $73 a barrel to $63. And if you remember, our petrol price is priced at the oil price multiplied by the rand value. So the rand has now depreciated since maybe 2 weeks ago at around about 18.30. The rand is probably somewhere off at 6%, but the oil price has come down 15%. So there is some correlation. What I am concerned about is, you know, Trump's hopes to be in for a third term, and I doubt if the American Congress, because remember, it's not a simple majority that changes the Constitution. 50 plus 1, it's 75 plus 1, and you know he doesn't have 75%. But what's going to happen afterwards? But talking about South Africa, yes, things we import and we export to the United States, we're going to be paying more. We're not fighting back with tariffs. We'll still bring in the goods where we're unable to manufacture, because after COVID, the big problem was supply, because factories have stopped producing. Well, where we import, a lot of those factories are still producing, and hopefully when our rand improves, and I'm one of those, and remember, there are no geniuses when it comes to the rand, but I'm allowed in a guess like you are, Cathy. I think the rand will recover. When the rand recovers, goods will come in again at lower prices, and hopefully, you know, the taxation of South Africa, the 15.5% VAT that's going to go through, the fact that there was no band increase from a taxation point is not going to help the many people in South Africa.
So then, Brian, with all of that sort of said, how should we be adjusting our financial planning, if at all?
Well, it comes back to the first thing is your budget. So you've got to do your budget, and I've repeated that on nearly every single program over all these years. You've got to have a look at it. How does your budget stack up against the money you've got? All I can say is the news is all bad. So I'm advising clients the following, and I don't mean this in any way. I don't mean to be presumptuous. Tune to 308 and watch Peppa Pig, not CNN and all these financial programs, and pick up comics again. Start reading comics, and you'll feel a lot better in 2 to 3 months. Let me make this comment now quickly. Well, you know about Peppa Pig.
Brian
Do you know about Peppa Pig?
Brian Hirsch,
Yeah.
is that the best advice that you're going to give us this morning?
Yes, it's the best advice. Stop watching the news. In America, there are methods. Trump, when he came into power, he said he's going to cut taxes. He hasn't done that yet. Now, let's understand. Tariffs are an extra tax. It's an excise tax, and it gets added into your taxation. So he's got a lot of room to cut taxes, as he promised. And the Federal Reserve, not today, because Trump wants him to reduce interest rates, when they're satisfied that there is possibilities of a recession, which has certainly gone up in the percentage from 0 to anywhere between 50 to 60%, they can also cut rates. We can also cut rates in this country to make it a lot easier if we're moving into that realm. And so there are things that government has and Federal Reserve have. The reason I'm saying that, because 90% of people don't actually understand. They hear words, they pick out pieces, they have conversations with other people who are all negative. Don't follow the herd in terms of negativity. Do your budget, as I've said before, have a look how your budget stacks up with your income, and make sure that your income is great in your budget. That is the best thing you can do. Other than that, Peppa Pig and comics is the next for the next 2 to 3 months. Let me just make some comments.
That's advice I can get behind.
No, I want to just add a few things. Let me just say this to you. I had a look what happened when COVID came in. When COVID came in, the initial fall of the American market was 34.3%. 22 days later, it was up 24.4%. And 3 days later, 33.71%. When the Russian invasion in 22, the market dropped 13.5%. 22 days later, it was up 4.9%. When we had the global financial crisis in 2008, the markets dropped 33%. 22 days later, it was up 24%, and 63 days later, up 33%. Just to give you one more, I'll just talk about just to give you an example, the Asian financial crisis in 97, the market dropped 12.4%, 22 days later, up 8.8%, and 63 days later, 11.6%. So these are all events that have happened previously. We've been there. This has just happened to be another event which is man-made by one person, Trump. Even the people around him, he did not consult. So a little bit of a dictator, and we have to play it out slowly, but it's no point for panic. And again, I repeat, you asked me, what should investors do other than watching Peppa Pig and reading comics, is do your budget and make sure that your income is more than your budget. If it's not, find ways of cutting back.
You know, Brian, as you were speaking, and I'm sure many of our listeners would have chuckled out loud with me as you were talking about watching Peppa Pig, but certainly you going into that history, it says, you know what, some advice out of good, steady hands, it's good advice. After all that you have said, I think Peppa Pig is really good advice because you're saying don't get lost in the noise.
Yeah.
Sit back, allow the noise to pass, and then only will we have a better picture of what's really happening.
Don't panic, because companies, you can't do anything. But the big companies that you may be invested in through Satrix or your unit trusts or your endowment policies or your equity portfolios, those companies, they have got plans. They do SWOT analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities and threats. They understand this is a threat, this is going to do something, and they will work through it somehow. It may take some time, but we sitting there and talking and being negative and worrying and panicking, that's not the time. My role, I'm no longer at the moment a financial advisor, I'm a financial psychologist. Keep holding people's hands, saying, don't panic, just relax and sit back. Don't watch the news every day. Don't look at your financial portfolios every week or every month. When you value a property, you don't value your property every day or every week or every month. It's a long-term investment. So is your growth investments. From an income point of view, South Africans are getting great income. Interest rates haven't dropped at all. So a government retail bond is paying 10.25% for 5 years, taxable. So you need to look at the net rate. And if you wanted to buy a government bond, which is where government, you can get today on the 20-year government bond over 12%. Again, that interest is taxable, so you need to understand that. So there are things you can do, but don't panic and do anything that you need to rush in to do. The markets will settle and the companies will. We're going to get a first quarter reporting now, which is a little bit behind because the tariffs weren't in yet. I'm sure now banks are reporting next week, technology companies towards the end of the month. I'm sure you'll find that those results will be good, but it'll be interesting, the commentary that comes out from, because, when companies issue results, they have a commentary. How do they see the next period going forward? We have to wait for that, but they will adjust. Do not panic.
Okay.
Stay calm.
So I've got a question here from one of our listeners, and this is before we get just into your questions more broadly for Brian, that you can start sending through, of course, on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial for our studio line, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. That's where you can send your WhatsApp voice notes and questions. One of our listeners wants to know if the seminar this afternoon is going to be recorded and are you going to be putting it up on your website?
I really don't know. I can't answer that question, but I certainly will ask our computer people who will be in my office at 3:00. I'm certainly able to send out all my slides, but sometimes my slides without the commentary aren't as effective. I will take that request from you. So you want me? Will it be up on my website? And will you be able to stay? Yeah. I'm sure it shouldn't be a problem.
It's
You would
very
know.
easy. It's very easy to do, Brian.
Easy to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Then if it's easy to do, what do we say? It'll be done.
I'm laughing because he's such a financial guru, ne? But imagine recording Teams meeting. Eh? You just press record, Brian. Just press record. I'm judging you, but I'm not judging you. But I am judging you.
Is that the button on the left or the button on the right? Or is that the one below the one on the left?
It's the button that you clearly have never seen. All right, let's take the latest 10:30 news headlines. We're back with Brian after this.
Good morning. In the headlines, Kusatu in Limpopo has raised concerns over the rising number of child rape incidents in the country. This as the union is set to picket outside the Nebo Magistrates Court in support of a 17-year-old girl who was allegedly raped by her father. Sergeant David Fortuin has continued to testify in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha. The court has been hearing evidence in a trial within a trial to determine the admissibility of the statements of the accused Jacqueline Apollos and Stevino van Rijn. And the South African Workers' Union in the Eastern Cape will shortly embark on a peaceful march to the Buffalo City Metro Municipality to raise concerns on a number of issues. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11.
Well, taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 19 rand 55 to the dollar, 24 rand 91 to the pound, and 21 rand 39 to the euro. Markets in Asia extended gains at the closing bell. The JC weaker during mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are currently trading higher. Gold is trading at $3,004, platinum $922 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $64.01 a barrel.
WAFCON preparations continue as African champions Banyana Banyana meet again with the Scorchers in a thrilling pitch battle. This is the international friendly. Experience the beauty of African women's football. South Africa versus Malawi. This Tuesday, 8 April at 2:30 p.m. Live streaming on SABC Plus, SABC2, SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, and at 3 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
You wouldn't want to pay more than you need to for petrol, so why overpay for car insurance? Switch to Outsurance and you could win every month. Tyler, a 25-year-old man, is a real Outsurance client who saves an unbelievable 718 Rand a month on his 2021 Ford Figo 1.5. Isn't it time you got the real deal? Don't pay more. Switch and save today. SMS out to 42876. That's out to 42876. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
April is Freedom Month, a month to reflect, celebrate, and move forward. SAFM is bringing you powerful stories, insightful debates, and voices that shape our nation. Stay tuned to SAFM, where freedom, history, and the future meet. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
All right, we continue talking finance with Brian Hirsch. And like I said, I'm taking your questions for Brian. The number to dial for our studio line 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. Cathy in Johannesburg says, "Hi, Cathy. Well, thank goodness for Brian Hirsch. At least I don't feel like jumping off the roof. Now we have to hope that our government learns some sense and stops worrying about their stomachs only. Somebody else says, hi, Cathy and Brian. I love your show. Reading the financial news every day is deadly. Reading comics and watching light films is not a bad idea at all. Somebody else says, who the hell is Peppa Pig, Brian? And he's laughing there, so I'm sure he knows exactly.
Well, Cathy, I don't. But you would know who Peppa Pig is, surely.
Yeah, I've got a lot of, not too much though. I've got one Peppa Pig book in my house, so I know exactly who Peppa Pig is. Let's see, Durban, Carl, good morning.
Brian and all the listeners. Brian, in about 2007-8.
Sorry, Carl, if you can just hang 10 for me. I need to make sure that Brian can actually hear you. Please say good morning again for me, Carl.
Good morning.
Brian, can you hear that?
Just hold on, Carl. We're in this new studio. Just, Carl, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
Yeah, perfect.
Hi.
Okay, wonderful. So, sorry about that, Carl. You can go for it.
No problem. Around about the 2008 crash, Brian, I recall reading in the Sunday Tribune an article by, I think his name was Richard Calland, about buying a 5,000 rand option to purchase a bond at the current price, and if the interest rate dropped within the next 3 months, you could then sell your option on for quite a tidy profit, I think 150,000 rand per interest rate, 4.4. Could you expand on that? Is that still a thing?
Yeah. Look, selling anything or buying anything in the hope that interest rates fall is certainly an option. Let me explain to you. People don't always understand how government bonds work. So perhaps I can just take a minute to explain. A government bond is where the government needs money and they issue a bond with a coupon period, say, anything between 10 and 20 years. So let's use a 10-year government bond. So they'll issue you'll pay, let's say you pay 100,000 for that coupon and you're getting 10% interest. I'm just using it as an example. I'm not quoting any particular government bond at the moment because I did speak about the 20-year government bond paying over 12%. So 100,000, 10%, you're getting 10,000 rand. Now, interest rates go up from 10% to 11%, and you want to sell your bond, and someone who's going to buy your bond is going to buy it at a discount because they're only asking, I want 100,000 rand from my bond, and if the interest rate's now 11%, they only have to invest just over 90,000 rand in that bond. At 11% will give you your 100,000 rand. So they're only looking at the income. So if you sold it, you would lose on that bond 10,000 rand. Now we're in the opposite. If interest rates come down, say to 9%, someone coming in to buy your government bond would actually have to pay 111,000 because 9% on the 111, and I'm averaging out 9% of 100 is 100. So you would be able to sell your 100,000 rand bond at 111,000. So you're absolutely right. You take an option through a trading house, and you want to buy bonds, and you can buy those bonds on the off chance that interest rates will come down. I firmly believe that there's good trading in bonds. I like the government retail bond because it doesn't fluctuate. By the way, when you buy a bond, when you get that bond at 100,000. And it's a 10-year bond. At the end of 10 years, government are guaranteeing you to give you back your 100,000. But during the 10-year period, that bond trades up and down depending on interest rates. So they're good opportunities there. But you need to understand how this piece would fit in to your investment jigsaw puzzle. Don't just do it in isolation. Don't any listeners please just go out and buy bonds. But if you buy into a bond fund now, it's a very good place to find for income. But understand. Income from bonds is taxable, so you've got to understand how much tax, what is your tax rate and what is your net rate. A government retail bond for someone not paying tax, it's a 5-year bond, giving 10.25% is a great return if you're not paying tax. If you're in a 30% marginal rates worth of tax, you've got to deduct 30% other than the rebate you get, which is 22,800 if you're under 65 and 34,500. By the way, in my webinar this afternoon, I will be explaining what a bond is, what an equity is, all the other components that make up a investment program. So I hope that helps you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Just to clarify, I wasn't talking about laying out the million for the actual bond itself, an option to buy.
Yeah, you can buy an option. Yeah, there are many companies selling options. They're selling. I think Standard Bank is one of them. You could go on and have a look at whether you can buy it to see. In other words, you pay. You take that 100,000 rand bond or the R1 million, but you've got to pay a premium for that option. Remember that premium also. When I'm talking about interest rates, I'm talking about interest rates falling in the next 6.
But you only have to lay out like 5 or 20,000 rand.
Yes, but then. But if the minute that money's lost, used up, in other words, if it goes the other way, you get wiped out. So you're buying an option. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you.
All right, Carl. All the best. Let me go to Mangaung. Magdalene, good morning.
Morning, Cathy and Brian. Brian, I like the point that you make that, okay, I'm talking about the tariff thing of Trump. I like the point, and even other callers have been saying it, that if we can't make business with America, why can't we go to other countries? Yes, it's a right move. But the point is that with myself, from my opinion, the point of view is that I see this tariff thing as an opportunity on the other side. We've been battling with the point of trying to have industrialization in South Africa. We've been talking about it a long time ago, but I see now as an opportunity that whatever that has been a backlog or a problem to us as South Africans is an opportunity now. First of all, number one, listen to me carefully. Number one, redistribution of land. If it is effectively redistributed according to the plans and the ideas of the people who want that land, that will help us to come to the point of industrialization. And not forgetting that to industrialize is not only about one thing. It's about so many things. It's about the agricultural point. It's about the waste. The very same waste we've been taking to China, and we've been complaining about it. And even China and everywhere, they've been complaining about it. So that's why we are going to develop ourselves and put ourselves out of poverty and into a better situation of GDP within South Africa. And moreover, get rid of this thing of VAT. We'll be in that position as long as we are going to do the things in a right way, not in a biased way.
Okay.
The biased way is a problem. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I guess it was more of a comment from Magdalene than
Yeah, but she's absolutely right. And companies will be saying, if we're exporting and it's landing in America at a much higher price, are there other markets? You know, the amazing thing is, all through this period, all through what's been happening, we haven't had one comment from a BRICS country who said, don't worry about what's happening in America. We will help open doors for you to markets, which is amazing, because you would have thought there are 11 countries now belonging to BRICS, and you would have thought not one of them has come forward. But Magdalene, you're absolutely correct. We need to find other markets. We can't say to America, we won't sell you. I mean, the most stupid thing we said to America is we won't give you our minerals. Let me explain to you, we don't give anyone minerals. We sell minerals. And as you know, our commodities and minerals had no impact. I think going forward from a company point of view, yes, companies are going to have to find other markets. They're going to have to start to think differently. Maybe America was an easy market, and they're going to they will view their goods and their products and how they do things differently, because it's only America we've got the tariffs. You're absolutely right. Magdalene, thank you for sharing that with our listeners.
Okay. Let's take these WhatsApp questions for Brian. We'll take them one at a time.
Good morning, CCKT, my princess. Great show always with your team in studio. Good morning to all our SFM listeners, not including our legend, Brian Hirsch. Thanks for motivating us. We are now into another level. Through you, Brian, your motivation. Brian, I have a question to you. I've got 1K. Which trust can I put? What can I do? Actually, I need advice. I've got 1K. What must I do with 1K?
Okay, and when do you need to access that 1K? Is it in 6 months? Is it in 5 years? Where?
He's on he's on the WhatsApp, Brian.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you've got 1K and you've got a long-term time horizon, understand long-term. I've described it before. My late grandmother said long-term for her was 1 week, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks. She's 99 years old, and a young man in my office, the grandson, he said 1 week. His long-term, short-term is 2 days, Monday, Tuesday. Short, medium-term is Wednesday, Thursday, and long-term is the weekend. So if you've got long-term 5 to 7 years, go into Satrix, go into offshore funds, pick up the S&P index at these levels. I know it may be a little bit early because we've still got to wait for this to settle down, but I would say give it another month or 6 weeks and then put it into a Signia or Satrix S&P portfolio. If you've got a long term. If you haven't got a long term, put the money into the bank. You earn interest. You've got no risk there. You've got certainty and security.
In the meantime, what should he do? Put it in a savings account?
Yeah, just hold it in your savings account and you'll earn a little bit of interest.
Okay. So there's your advice then, Uncle
And
JJ.
you have a great day. I think, are you busy driving a truck?
Yes.
Is that our truck driver?
Yes.
Just drive carefully. Be very, very careful.
All right. More questions for you, Brian?
Cathy, what is Brian saying about the S&P at this stage?
Okay, the
It's
S&P.
done so badly, and I remember him giving S&P to some listener who phoned in as advice to buy or to get into the S&P, and that was just a short few weeks ago.
Well, to put you in the picture, the S&P in the last 2 years is up 50%. The S&P's now come down something like 14%. Yep. My advice has been, if you've got long term, as I just spoke to our caller previously, I said if you've got a 5 to 7 year time horizon, S&P's the top 500 companies, which also includes all the Magnificent Seven, which includes the Amazons, the Apple, Nvidias, all the companies that are technology driven. And I still am very much in favor of it, but it's not short term. And you're not going to get 50% return on an index in 2 years and then just expect it to keep going up and up. I've always said if you can get a 10 to 12% return in dollars, you are doing exceptionally well. So we're having a down day, we're having a down month. Certainly February and March were down months. If you're currently investing, carry on investing at these low levels because markets will turn. And so you've got to understand, if you're looking at your values today compared to December, yes, you are down, but you're a long-term investor. S&P, NASDAQ, Dow, all these indexes that are growth-orientated are long-term indexes. If you're talking about short term, you wouldn't be in the S&P. So I still strongly favor the S&P. The markets have come down, great buying opportunities, although I would just wait a little bit for a month or two just to let the dust settle, see how this all develops before I start putting more money in. If I'm going to put money in, I'm going to phase it in. I'm going to put it in over the next 3 to 9 months. So every month I'm going to be putting in maybe 10% to 15% and gradually grow, because I can tell you right now, in 3 to 4 years' time, that's the index that'll do well as many other indexes. Just bear in mind, markets have these days. Don't worry, don't panic, and I still strongly favour the S&P for the long term.
All right. Thanks for that, Brian. Another question coming in for you. Could systems such as MoneyGram and Western Union be affected by the U.S. tariffs?
Just repeat that, could?
Could systems such as MoneyGram and the Western Union be affected by the U.S. tariffs?
Well, you see, it's quite amazing, because I read an article yesterday spoke about how many people are using credit cards and not using cash. And yet MasterCard, Visa, American Express and Diners Club all came off in the markets quite substantially in the last 2 weeks. And people are not going to be using cash. They're still going to be using their credit cards. There may be a lull in spending, but people will start using it. I mean, so many places today. You go to a sporting event these days, you can't even use cash. You have to use a credit card. Someone on the side of the road asking for money, and you say, I don't have any money. They suddenly pull out systems and they want me to give them a donation using a credit card, which, by the way, I would never do, but because I don't understand fully. But I think that, they may be affected in the short term, as everything has. I mean, why have some of them indexes come off so badly? Just relax and know, just think back. Growth means long term. The word growth ends in the letters T and H says I need time and I need to hold my investments through the bad times. These are great times to gradually be going back into markets, not bad times.
All right. Thanks for that, Brian. We're going to continue taking more of your calls and questions for Brian Hirsch. The number to dial this morning, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. We'll continue with that after this break.
April is Freedom Month, a month to reflect, celebrate, and move forward. SAFM is bringing you powerful stories, insightful debates, and voices that shape our nation. Stay tuned to SAFM, where freedom, history, and the future meet. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
You wouldn't, wrong live read. Let's go for this one. The Small Business Plug is proudly brought to you by Smart SME by Santam. Head on over to www.radio2000.co.za for the latest Small Business Plug podcast. Smart SME is tailored insurance specifically designed to give small business owners the freedom to focus on their business, knowing that they have the insurance cover they need. Visit santam.co.za or SMS Smart SME to 34852 to get a quote.
Is there ever a bad time for a good conversation? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Talking finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
All right, Brian, here's a question for you. It says, good morning. I've borrowed 80,000 Rand, including tax, from the two-pot system. Now I want to start putting money aside to make up for the 80K plus the interest it would have made in 6 years, which is my retirement year. How can I go about doing that?
Okay, let me put it clear. You haven't borrowed it, you've actually withdrawn from it, because taking money out of the two-pot system is not borrowing. You've actually accessed 80,000 of your money. So the only way you can either do it is take a monthly amount, work out what that 80,000 Rand will be in 6 years' time. I reckon that 80,000 that you've taken out probably in 6 years' time would be somewhere around about 150,000 Rand. So you now need to work out how much do you need to invest to get back to that 150,000 over the next 6 years. Remember, you invest today for 6 years, it's got 6 years to run. In 3 years' time, whatever you're investing, it's only got 3 more years. Someone needs to do the calculation. I would reckon you would need to put in, and I've got no machines here, but I would reckon you need to put in somewhere around about 15 to 2,000 Rand a month, which is 24,000 Rand a year. 24,000 times 6 years is 144,000. You'll probably have at that you'll have more money than you would have had if you left it in the pension fund. Okay. By the way, you're not paying interest on the pension fund. They've actually accessed 80,000. So if you had R1 million in your pension fund before and you took out 80,000, your pension fund is now worth 920,000.
Tsebo from Ditsobotla wants to know, where do we put the disposal death benefit for children who are 22 years old, 20 years old, 18 years old, and the wife as well? And Tsebo also wants to know, where can we get good financial advisors?
Well, when you say where do we put it, I mean, anyone over the age of 18 can inherit. So I'm not sure if this money is coming from a pension fund or inheritance. And you can't put it anywhere. I mean, it depends on what, often in a will, it will say we leave money to children under the age of 25 in a trust. And you have to set up a trust in terms of the distribution. If that's from a will, if it's come from a retirement fund, anyone over the age of 18 who is a beneficiary is entitled to either continue with a pension or alternatively draw the cash and pay the tax. So perhaps you should send me a WhatsApp on my email. It's www www.bhca.co.za, and I will put one of my financial advisors in touch with you.
All right, thanks for that, Brian. This goes back to a question. It keeps coming up, Brian. Those Barlow World shares. Did you ever get an answer?
I did. Did I not give an answer?
I remember you giving it, but I don't know why it's coming up
again. I'll tell you
again.
what, I spoke to Sendili at Barlow's, and I'll give him a ring again. I can't remember, so I'm not going to pretend. Get so many questions. But I do remember speaking to him. Next week, I'll certainly come back with Barlow shares.
Okay. All right. So, Brian, we're getting ready then to wrap the conversation up. This afternoon, of course, another reminder about the Spirit of Youth seminar that's coming up.
Yeah, it's a webinar. You have to be invited. So please, if you want to join this afternoon at 3:30, it's www.bhca.coza. Please send us a request. We will send you an invite. Send you the link. And yes, someone asked, is it going to be, I will find out when I get back from our computer people, is it going to be recorded, and exactly how do we distribute? I will check up on that.
And Brian, I'm just seeing something here that's reminded me of this, and I wanted to ask you about it. Again, with all of the shifts that are happening, they, of course, especially on social media, you'll find people saying, no, take advantage of the tariff slashes and, go onto the stock exchange and see where to buy, to go and trade. So, again, I think just the usual reminder.
Cathy,
Brian.
you used the word there, trade. When we talk on this program, we don't talk about trading the markets. We don't say buy today, sell tomorrow. I don't get involved in that. I'm talking about investing. Investing is a 5 to 7 year process. It's nothing earlier. Anything between 1 to 3 years, money market, government retail bonds, either 2 or 3 or even 5 years. There are other ways of investing. Understand that you need time on your side to iron out volatility. I've said that now over and over and over the years. We're now having one of those times that we've had 16 times before. By the way, just to let you know, I've been in this industry 60 years. Now, let me put that in context. 720 months. Work that out. 720 months. This is not the first time. I've had at least, well, I wasn't around during the World Wars, but I've had at least 12 events in that period of time. Markets don't only go up, they go down. People don't realize that. There are risks associated. Trading, yeah, you may have some opportunities. You heard the market's a little bit up, so if you bought yesterday, but that doesn't mean they won't be down tomorrow.
Okay. Your contact details, Brian?
Well, it's www.bhca.co.za. That's where you can get hold of me. Send me an email. We'll get back to you. In the meantime, if you want to join this afternoon at 3:30, the webinar, use that. We'll send you an invite. I can assure you, for younger people and maybe even the older people who've got children and grandchildren, you want to make sure they don't make the same mistakes that maybe you made, and maybe some of the difficulties you had because you weren't able to, you gave them the education, you gave them home, but you weren't able to do much more for yourself, and that's why you're struggling now in retirement. So I think they'll get some good benefit from it, and I'll see about making sure that we can send it out after the show.
All right, there you have it, the Spirit of Youth, coming up this afternoon at 3:30, and Brian is going to get somebody to find the record button for him so that they're able to also put that conversation up on their website. So, stress less is what Brian says, panic less, and watch Peppa Pig. So, who are we to say no, hey?
Cathy, will I find my way out?
Watch.
or will I still be wandering around?
It depends on whether or not you watch Peppa Pig.
Yeah, Peppa Pig or any of the other channels, 300 upwards. Stay away from channels 401, 402, right up to 418. Stay away.
I'm Peppa Pig. This is my little brother George. This is Mummy Pig. And this is Daddy Pig. Peppa Pig. Pig. This is my little brother George. This is Mummy Pig. And this is Daddy Pig. Peppa Pig.
Well, don't ever say we don't make you smile on this show, right? Don't ever accuse us of doing that. All right, Brian's already getting out of here. Of course, he's back with you again next week, Tuesday, between 10 and 11 as we talk finance. Okay, we'll take a quick break. It'll lead us into the 11 o'clock news update.
Are we ready for a real conversation? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Night Talk with Oliver Dixon.
When leaders need to account, we call on them. When society needs to debate, reflect, and advance, we're here to have the conversation. Join me, Oliver Dixon, on Night Talk every Monday to Thursday from 10 to 12 midnight.
In our top stories, COSATU pickets against child rape incidents in the country, and Sergeant Fortuin testifies in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial. Good morning. COSATU in Limpopo has raised concerns over the rising number of child rape incidents in the country. This as the union is set to picket outside the Enable Magistrates Court in support of a 17-year-old girl who was allegedly raped by her father. The suspect will appear in court this morning. The union is expected to picket outside several courts this week in support of gender-based violence survivors. COSATU's Provincial Secretary Hangwani Mashao.
We're just worried about the rising spate of these kinds of incidents, because it's not only this incident in James West or Skokoni. There are a number of other gender-based violence incidents. As we protest today in Skokoni, we will be highlighting this rise in the number of gender-based violence to discourage communities from engaging in these acts of gender-based violence, but also to encourage victims to come forward and expose those that have committed acts of gender-based violence against them.
In another march, residents of Soweto have handed over a memorandum to officials at the Orlando police station. They are calling for action following the reported rape of a 7-year-old girl, allegedly on school premises in the Eastern Cape. The assault of the girl and the increase of reports of child rape cases have led to renewed calls nationwide for urgent action to protect children. Protesters have handed a memorandum of demands to the authorities. This protester read out the list.
We demand the immediate release of the National Registry for Sexual Offenders to prevent further abuse and protect vulnerable individuals. The registry will be made publicly available, and employees, schools, and other relevant parties will be required to access the registry to ensure the safety of children and communities. We demand immediate implementation of mandatory GBV trauma training for all SAPS officers in partnership with civil society organizations.
Sergeant David Fortuin has continued to testify in the Jocelyn Smith disappearance trial in the Western Cape High Court sitting in Saldanha. The court has been hearing evidence in a trial within a trial to determine the admissibility of statements of the accused Jacqueline Apollos and Stevino van Rijn. It also heard that Apollos confessed that they sold Jocelyn to a Sangoma. Apollos, van Rijn and Jocelyn's mother Kelly Smith are on trial for her disappearance. The South African Workers' Union in the Eastern Cape will shortly embark on a peaceful march to the Buffalo City Metro Municipality to raise concerns on a number of issues. They include corruption, the exploitation of expanded public works program, financial mismanagement and outstanding payments dating back to the COVID-19 pandemic. The union's Provincial Secretary Assam Zantaka.
These issues are not issues that arose yesterday. In 2020, a directive was issued out to all municipalities across the country for them to pay municipal workers a danger allowance. We agreed with Buffalo City many years ago that this issue must be resolved, and they agreed that it will be resolved. But up until now, what they do is they keep on postponing, and eventually they told us that they won't pay the danger allowance. So it's many issues that have been standing there. So as some, we cannot keep quiet.
And finally, emergency workers in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have killed 19 people. The number of victims in the territory has continued to mount daily since Israel resumed its offensive last month. UN agencies have appealed for a ceasefire and a resumption of the much-needed aid deliveries. UN Secretary-General spokesperson Stefan Dujarric has described the situation in Gaza at a media briefing in New York.
The UN officials noted that for over a month, no commercial or humanitarian supplies have entered Gaza, and more than 2.1 million people are trapped, bombed, and starved again. Food, medicine, fuel, shelter supplies are piling up at crossing points, and vital equipment is also stuck.
Recapping the top story, Kusatu in Limpopo has raised concerns over the rising number of child rape incidents in the country. This as the union is set to picket outside the Nebo Magistrates Court in support of a 17-year-old girl who was allegedly raped by her father. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
The Saints are pumped up to fight even harder in search of 3 points on home ground.
And Smallbone has scored! His first Premier League goal! Liverpool stood like statues.
Meanwhile, the Villains are chasing a win to secure a decent top half spot.
Tielemans to Rashford. Rashford fires it in. Oh, it's got in! It's turned over by Marco Asensio again. 2 from him, 2 for Aston Villa, and 3 points surely.
This is the Premier League. Experience the thrilling encounter between Southampton FC and Aston Villa FC on Saturday, 12 April at 3:30 p.m. live on S3. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the
game. Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
It's an interesting time with regard to the Trump administration.
South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it.
Of course, everybody's doing a calculation and speculating on what could be included. The safest thing to do is to get confirmation from the US as to how they arrived at the number.
The African countries almost have to think of what I would call the coalition of the wounded, looking into various countries and saying who has been badly affected by the US and how can they open up the room for engagement on that.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.4 FM in Durban. Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Cathy, we hear the terrible figures in as far as rape is concerned, but the answer is one: bring back death penalty in South Africa. Because crime in South Africa is getting out of control on all fronts. And I know Cathy Mohlahlana will say, no, not death penalty, Motibang, not death penalty. It won't change anything. But it can. It had been abolished in America, but it was brought back during the mid-70s. It was brought back in Jamaica after Peter Tosh was murdered. So it can work. Let's bring it back because the crime is getting out of hand. Why don't you do what we as the citizens want? Motiba, thank you.
Morning, Katie. I just wanted to read the difference that how is the Minister of Education implementing the Bella Act, which he voted against, and against the difference that DA ministers should not participate because they did not vote for the budget implementation. What's the difference between the two? Anonymous from Soweto. Thank you.
Wow, Cathy. This is why I love SAFM. The only thing want to come here and justify uselessness. Coming here and telling us about being personal and what. You are correct, Cathy, by asking him. It's personal for community members. He comes here on a point of privilege. His kids are probably being dropped off at school by him or his wife. This is what we get, Cathy. This is exactly what we get from government officials. Useless to the core. They're just there, director of what, but they're useless. They're useless, in fact. You must not come here and tell us you must not be. It's personal for us. It's personal. Useless. Useless human beings.
Good day, Cathy. This is Anonymous here. I'm very disappointed, Cathy, from that director. I believe when there's a change of careers or jobs can change even the behavior and the character of a person. Because that director, I know him with the other character, not this one that I was hearing from him now. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you very much, Cathy, to put this director of communication in Northwest in place. Because this government always promising us things and then they don't meet those promises. And when they come, they justify everything, every time. I'm very excited how you cross-examine or question this guy, because he's coming with this excuse, and the people who are suffering is the citizens. Thank you very much, Cathy. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Cathy. Typical of these ANC deployees, the Department of Transport in the Northwest is taking so long to look for a service provider because they're still looking for a service provider that's going to bid for the highest bribe. Thanks, Lionel Whitbank.
Hi, morning, Cathy and the SAFM listeners. I mean, the guy that came on for Dr. Kekana has no clue what's happening. I know the conversation. I also had the conversation you had with, I think it's Tepo. Hey, these guys must not play. It's time to work. I'm disappointed because I think they are the ANC members, and of which is my party. Guys, wake up and work. This is Bafana from Nkwe, KwaZulu Natal.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Welcome to the third and final hour of the show. Yeah, as you could hear, lots of you still responding to that conversation we had on the open line with the Director of Communications for the Department of Community Safety and Transport in the Northwest Province, and it's over the provision of transport services, in particular for the Dinukana area. So it's certainly a story that we're going to continue keeping a close eye on. And you heard then the commitment made this morning that by the end of the month, they are hopeful that the bus services will be able to resume. The difficulty, of course, is that this is yet another province that has been made to residents who, as we've, as they've described in their own words, have been left in the lurch due to the difficulties with accessing transport. So for our final conversation today, we're going to be looking at legal aid, and in particular the services that it offers, but also the means test that is used when determining whether somebody is eligible to access legal aid support. Joining us for this conversation is Dick Kubana, who is the National Legal Manager for Legal Aid. Dr. Kubana, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and a very good morning to the SAFM listeners.
I think I may just have conferred a doctorate on you. Apologies for that, Mr. Kubana.
A lot of people do, Cathy. DR are my initials, but I've got no objection to being given a free title.
All right, apologies for that. So I think a good place for us to start, right, because I know that you are wanting to send the message through to let some of those who use your services know that there has been a CPI adjustment in relation to the means test and the eligibility criteria that you want clients to be mindful of. But let's just start with more broadly legal aid, the services that it offers, and who qualifies for these services.
Yes, Cathy, as you know, in our everyday interactions, people do come into conflict with the law and sometimes come into conflict with each other. And these are matters that are usually resolved in the courts. Now, our Constitution gives the right to accuse people who are appearing in the courts to legal representation. But as you know, not everyone can afford the cost of legal representation. So the Constitution goes further and says that where there is a possibility of substantial injustice occurring, a person who is appearing before a court as an accused person is entitled to have a legal representative made available to them at state expense. So in other words, if the person cannot afford a legal representative of their own, then a legal representative must be appointed for them or made available to them at no cost to them. This is with regard to criminal cases. But other sections of the Constitution also provide for a legal representation in civil cases. In other words, these are cases where a person is not going to the court as an accused person, but because of a civil matter, in other words, conflict between citizens and companies. So, Legal Aid South Africa is a body that was established by statute to make these provisions in the Constitution a reality to everyone in South Africa. So, if you have to be provided with legal aid at state expense, Legal Aid South Africa is then the organization that you will approach, and they will make legal representation available to you at no cost to you.
If we look at the criteria, the eligibility criteria for individuals to qualify to access these services, what is that criteria that they looked at through?
Yes. Obviously, Cathy, Legal Aid South Africa is funded by the public purse. We get our funding from National Treasury. So obviously, we cannot just dish out the service to everyone. So there has to be some criteria who qualifies to be assisted. Also, we need to be sure that the person applying for legal aid, in fact, cannot afford the services of their own legal representative. Before I can get to the ministers, there are some exclusions. For instance, in criminal cases, it is not all cases that you can get assistance with. So, for instance, very minor offenses like a speeding offense, traffic offense, we wouldn't make legal aid available for that. But there are other offenses that are excluded. For instance, a failure to pay maintenance after you've got a court order to pay maintenance. We do not make legal aid available for that. So in criminal cases, we do have a few exclusions. In civil cases, a little bit more exclusions, matters that we may not make legal aid available for. But once you've passed that, so if you come with a qualifying matter, in other words, a matter in respect of which legal aid is available, every applicant must first pass a means test. So you have to declare your income and your assets, and if you meet those qualifying criteria, then you will be eligible to legal aid assistance. Then you'll be provided with a legal representative to assist you with the case.
So Dick, what is, sort of what are the thresholds in that means test? If you can run us through it, please.
Yes, that's correct. So over the years, we've had, certain figures to say that if your income exceeds this amount, then you do not qualify for legal aid. This obviously takes into account the cost of living, and every year, as we know, the cost of living increases. So every year we increase this threshold and say, to take into account of the increase in the cost of employing a legal representative, for instance, we will also increase our means to make it higher. So the increases for this year, we have applied an increase of about 4.5% increase on the previous figures which we had. And the figures as they stand now, in terms of the means that applies from the 1st of April this year, is if we take your income, your gross income, and we deduct the income tax that you pay, you should remain with an amount not higher than 9,100 rand. So the threshold for passing the legal aid transfer means test is 9,100 rand. So once you've done the calculation, your gross income minus the income tax that you pay, you should remain with 9,100 rand. Anything below 9,100 rand, you qualify. So if your income then is determined as anything up to 9,100 rand, you qualify for legal aid assistance. We do have a second part to our means test where we look at the property that you own. And if you own movable property, in other words, things like motor cars or furniture and effects, you will still get legal aid, but if the value of those assets exceeds 167,900 rand, then you may not qualify for legal aid. You will not qualify for legal aid. Likewise, if you own immovable property means a property like a house or a property like as in real estate. If the value of that exceeds 787,600 rand, then you fall out of our means test and you will not qualify for legal aid.
Sure. I'm listening to just the figures in terms of the means test that you often apply when deciding whether or not somebody is able to access your services, and that threshold, of course, the target is quite low, and in this country we have, of course, this big challenge. If you're to look at it through the lens of higher education. We'll often hear talk of the missing middle, right? Where you have this big group of the middle class, or individuals that qualify, at least on paper, as being part of the middle class, but in reality, their salaries, their lived experiences are not one that would necessarily be able to afford the middle class lifestyle effectively. And I'm just curious about how legal aid then sort of deals with that kind of issue. Just again, given the threshold that you have.
Yes. So as I mentioned before, the purpose of you getting legal aid is, to avoid the possibility of substantial injustice occurring. So if you cannot have a lawyer, if you have to go to a court system without a lawyer, the chances are very high that a substantial injustice will result. So within the legal aid scheme, there are some mechanisms that are built in to address exactly what you just mentioned, the issue of the missing middle, or even some instances where a person may have an income that on the face of it appears to be high, but at that point that they require the legal services, they simply cannot afford the legal the services. So we have an appeal system or an appeal mechanism built into the application process. So the fact that you are beyond the threshold of the minister, so if your calculated income exceeds 9,100, you will fail the ministers. But we've got an appeal mechanism. Well, firstly, there is a discretion that a local office manager can exercise. So if the excess in that minister does not exceed 1,500 rand, a local manager can still nonetheless decide to grant you legal aid even though you exceed the minister. But after that, there are several other levels where you can appeal. So if you feel that you really cannot afford the service, you can appeal to a provincial executive, and they've got a discretion up to a certain amount if you exceed by an amount not exceeding 3,000 rand. But if you still exceed by an amount above that, you can still appeal to an executive at our national office, and legal aid, after evaluating everything, your income and your expenses, legal aid may still be provided to you. So this is a mechanism through which we cater for unusual circumstances or that issue that you raised about the missing needle. But in addition to this, our Act provides in certain circumstances for you to be granted legal aid subject to you making a contribution towards your own legal defense. So what this means is, in some instances where you exceed the means test, legal aid may be granted to you subject to you making a contribution to the cost of your legal representation. So you have to pay in a certain amount, not too high, but you have to pay in a certain amount as your own contribution to your legal defense. And the balance, obviously, is the cost of legal aid South Africa.
What would you describe as some of the challenges that you are facing at legal aid? Of course, over the years, there have been, a lot of issues raised around the resource constraints, that you have experienced budget cuts, and this also then gets in the way of your ability to extend your services to potential clients. But as things stand, if you are to sit and look at the number of people that are putting in applications to access legal aid versus those that are approved, do you have any figures in terms of what those ratios might look like?
Yes. Well, the issue of budget is a serious issue, not only for legal aid South Africa, but, the countrywide, we've got these economic challenges. But for several years now, legal aid has consistently every year faced reductions in its budget, which doesn't obviously bode well, because with the decrease in the budget, we are getting even more demand for legal aid services. But not only more increasing demand in terms of number of people applying, we are getting a request for legal aid in cases that are expensive. In other words, cases that take very long to finalize. So it could be one case, but that one case will cost what 100 or more cases would have cost, because the case is just such a complex case and it takes so long to finalize that it digs really deep into our resources. And this goes again to what we were talking about when we spoke about the missing needle. That in some cases, you can have a person that on the face of it does not qualify for legal aid, or their income appears to be quite substantial. But they are facing a trial that, if you take the cost of legal representation at current values, they just cannot afford to finance. If a child sits for every day for the next 3 months or for a whole year, it's very difficult, if you take into account the average income in South Africa for people to afford to pay for court appearance fees for lawyers on a daily basis. And in most cases, these people end up at Legal Aid South Africa. Some actually do try to pay for their lawyers for some time, but in the middle of the trial, they run out of funds, so they come to Legal Aid South Africa. So this is a very serious challenge that we're facing, reducing budgets, but increasing demand, but an increase in the complexity of cases that are going through the courts. Cases with multiple accused that take very long to finalize. And it's an issue that we have to do a balancing act. We have to do the best we can do with what we've got. But I can tell you now, it is not easy at all. We cannot just turn away people, unfortunately. In fact, in some cases, the courts compel us to provide legal aid if we refuse legal aid and it is clear that the person will not afford the services of their own legal representative. The courts can compel us to provide services to that person, and in that case, we've got a court order. When we've got no option, we do have to provide the service.
Okay, so we're going to continue the conversation with legal aid. I'll also bring in, give you an opportunity to ask specific questions to our guest. The number to use this morning is 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. Of course, one of the questions that comes up when we're talking about legal aid is the quality of legal representation that is often made available to clients. That is something that that also often comes up. And I see on the WhatsApp line, some of you have already started to raise that issue. So we'll take the latest 11:30 news headlines and continue the conversation shortly.
Thanks, Cathy. Good morning. I'm Khulufelo Tefo with the headlines. South Africa's Labour Minister Nomakosazana Meth says the recent drastic developments on the trade front have been disappointing. She was speaking at the opening of the second G20 Employment Working Group in Durban ahead of the G20 summit later this year. COSATU in Limpopo has raised concerns over the rising number of child rape incidents in the country. This as the union is set to picket outside the Nebo Magistrates Court in support of a 17-year-old girl who was raped allegedly by her father. And further afield, a report has found that the number of executions carried out around the world has reached its highest level in almost a decade. I'll have your details at the top of the hour.
April is Freedom Month, a month to reflect, celebrate, and move forward. SAFM is bringing you powerful stories, insightful debates, and voices that shape our nation. Stay tuned to SAFM, where freedom, history, and the future meet. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point, and we're looking at legal aid this morning and just, of course, running through the means test that they use often to decide which cases they're able to take on, but also looking at some of the challenges that clients might be experiencing in as far as accessing those services is concerned. So I want to play these two voice notes for you. Our guest this morning is Dick Kubana, who is the National Legal Manager Criminal. Dick, I want to play these two questions for you, and it's around the criteria that legal aid uses.
Yeah, I'd like to comment regarding the legal aid means test. I think that is very unfair and discriminatory. Maybe a lifestyle audit would help. For example, looking at the person's expenses and bank accounts and what they spend their money on before they actually do a means test, buy property, etc. Aren't we supposed to own a home of our own? Number one. Number two, I paid 125,000 rand for my house when many years ago, over 20 years ago. According to the city of Cape Town, it's now 1.6 million. by no fault of mine. I haven't moved, nothing has happened, but they basically, because you live close to the city, it's a matter of gentrification that we suffer under. Thank you.
Hi, Cathy. I have a question for your guest, please. I'd like to know, I know that he mentioned the threshold in terms of affordability and earnings for one to qualify for us to receive legal assistance. So when a person is above the threshold but unemployed at a certain period where a legal issue arises, do they assist? Secondly, do they assist with matters pertaining the ombudsman, for example? If there's a matter that's in existence with a specific ombudsman and the person would like to get legal assistance to deal with the issue, do they assist? Thank you, Cathy. Meta.
Okay, Dick.
Thank you, Cathy. To the first caller, who spoke about verifying means by means of a lifestyle audit and that kind of thing. You must understand that the legal resources that we have are utilized to provide legal representation, and this is our main mandate. Means investigations and lifestyle audits cost money. So to do that, we would have to take those resources that we have to go and conduct investigations on means and that kind of thing. We do have some capability to verify an applicant's means, and the applicant is required to submit these things that we mentioned, for instance, bank accounts. So if a person applies for legal aid, we do require them to give us some evidence of their income and assets. So, for instance, if they've got an asset and they say, I've got a house, we may require them maybe to give the statement of the bond account statement or the municipal statement, so that we perform some verification. But it is not a deep investigation where we would go and spend money and to check if the person qualifies or they don't qualify. As I said, we do have some capability to check, for instance, if a person owns property or if they've got directorships in a company. So we do that, but we cannot do it in every case. Yes, everyone is allowed to own a home. In fact, at Legal Aid South Africa, we have dealt with many cases, that deal with housing, where, we protect people's rights to housing. So we're not saying that people shouldn't own a home. The whole issue about this part of the means test that deals with property is if you do own property, then you could realize some property, you could realize some free value from your property to pay for your legal defense. It's not to say that you should altogether sell your property and have no home at all, so that you can pay for your own legal defense. But I'm sure, as a matter of public policy also, I think it would be revolting if a person that owned a fixed property worth, say, 10 million rand would apply for legal aid and automatically get legal aid because he is entitled to have a home or a house to live in. And moving on to the second caller, an unemployed person obviously doesn't have an income. So if a person is unemployed, then obviously they haven't got an income. So that first part of the means test, they would definitely qualify. Maybe there's, the second part dealing with assets, maybe they may have substantial assets, in which case we would apply the means test to everyone, whether they're employed or not employed. Like in the example that I gave, a person could be unemployed, but they have substantial assets, or even savings in the bank, or finance that's invested somewhere. The fact that you're not employed does not necessarily mean that you do not have any assets, or you do not have any funds that you can utilize to pay for your legal representation. And the last question that was asked about the ombuds, we do not provide services in disputes that are, before an ombudsman in any sector. The whole idea about establishing the office of an ombud is to avoid legal processes so that disputes can be settled or mediated in an easier way without going through the court system and obviously through lawyers. So we do not provide a service there. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of ombudsmen will not entertain a request for legal representation. So you have to go through the process without a legal representative anyway. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Let me go to Jay in Somerset West. Jay, good morning.
Oh, hi. Interesting. A thought before my question. An illegal person coming into South Africa from one of the 5 surrounding countries is had up and put into jail. I think there should be an agreement that that person goes back to their own country and serves their sentence in their own country and is watered and fed by their own country, and South Africa doesn't have to pay for it. Now, here's my question. That illegal person who came into the country stands trial for, say, rape or murder. I want to know if they can apply for legal aid or not, and I'll listen on the radio. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Jay. Dick?
Yes. The South African Constitution, the rights contained in the South African Constitution do not discriminate against people in terms of their citizenship or nationality. So as long as you're in South Africa, you're entitled to the same rights that a South African has. And this only doesn't apply to legal aid, but your right to health, any right that a South African has got, as long as you're in South Africa, you've also got that right. So if a person is an immigrant, legal or illegal, and they are going through a court process here in South Africa, they are entitled to legal aid. We do provide them with legal aid. We cannot, well, it's not our decision, but the person cannot be sent back to their own country to stand trial there because they haven't committed the crime in that country. So they don't fall within the jurisdiction of the courts in that country because no crime was committed there. But neither will a country take a person who's found guilty in South Africa and say, come back home just to save your sentence. The person hasn't committed an offense in that country. But as for the entitlement to legal aid, yes, everyone who is in the country is entitled to legal aid.
And in terms of those numbers, then do we have a breakdown that will give us a picture of how many South Africans are on legal aid, how many non-nationals are on legal aid?
Cathy, I know that some other departments within the criminal justice cluster may keep statistics like that of how many people were foreign nationals and how many were not foreign nationals. But for our purposes, anyone who applies for legal aid is entitled to legal aid. So we do not differentiate the data on whether the person that we are representing is a foreign national or an illegal immigrant or not an illegal immigrant. It is not. Those are issues that are within the mandates of other cluster departments. So I wouldn't be able to give you a breakdown and say we represent out of 100 people we represent this percentage was foreign nationals or illegal immigrants or anything of that sort.
Sure. And do you have clarity around which departments that information would sit with?
Yeah, I can tell you now. For instance, if you ask the Department of Correctional Services, who they would be able to tell you of the people that they keep in the correctional centers. How many are South Africans, how many are foreign nationals, and that sort of thing. I have had figures mentioned along those lines, but I don't know if every department would keep statistics like that. We certainly do not do that, but I'm sure maybe some departments. I know correctional services for instance, are able to answer that question. But as you know, correctional services are at the tail end of the process, and they're only dealing with not everyone that has gone through the criminal justice system, but only the percentage that were sentenced to imprisonment or.
Yeah, I would imagine that just from a data set point of view, it would be just important data to be tracking for us as a country, no?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. As I say, the reason why we don't specifically check it is because the right in the Constitution has got no differentiation. So there's not. We cannot say that this, such and such a person is entitled to legal aid because because they are South African, or because they are legally in the country, or they are illegal in the country. So
so I guess my question or the point is positioned differently. It's more to understand the demographic of those that are benefiting from the legal aid system more than it is to be on a witch hunt of sort to say that there are this many non-migrants on the legal aid system, etc. I mean, I would imagine that even, data such as the gender of those that are on the legal aid system, that is important data to capture, because all of it speaks about access to the justice system, right? And we've got to be able to unpack those numbers at the end of the day to say who are the people that are able to access the justice system through the legal aid,
Yes. You see, differentiators like gender to us are very important because women, for instance, as you know, are classified as a vulnerable group. So children, for instance, that is another specific vulnerable group. So in our data, we can certainly give you a differentiation and say this is the number of children that we've represented, and this is the number of women that we've represented, because these are specific vulnerable groups, and we need to know what percentages or how many recipients of our services fall within those vulnerable groups.
Yeah, look, I guess that's fine, Mr. Kubana. We'll have to leave it there. But I suppose from just a data collection point of view, that would definitely be something that I think will be of interest for legal aid. But as you're saying, it might also be about looking at the other departments to see who's tracking that kind of data. We'll leave it there for today. Dick Kubana is the National Legal Manager, a criminal for legal aid. That, of course, brings us to the end of the talking point for today. The show is going to be back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Up next is the book reading.
WAFCON preparations continue as African champions Banyana Banyana meet again with the Scorchers in a thrilling pitch battle. This is the international friendly. Experience the beauty of African women's football. South Africa versus Malawi. This Tuesday, 8 April at 2:30 p.m. Live streaming on SABC Plus, SABC2, SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, and at 3 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
It's an interesting time with regard to the Trump administration.
South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. We're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it.
Of course, everybody's doing a calculation and speculating on what could be included. The safest thing to do is to get confirmation from the US as to how they arrived at the number.
The African countries almost have to think of what I would call the coalition of the wounded, looking into various countries and saying who has been badly affected by the US and how can they open up the room for engagement on that.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Smart SME by Santam is insurance that offers flexible solutions for your business because every small business has different needs. It's on-the-go insurance that covers it all, your offices, stock and more. We cover the all in small business. Visit santam.co.za or SMS Smart SME to 34852 to get a quote. Santam, this is freedom.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.1 FM in Johannesburg.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of the book The Thing with Zola by Zibu Sitole, read by Lerato Mvelase.
That was fair, Zola decided. In fact, it was more than fair. Although Zola's work was meticulous, Oguhle could easily have found a reason to fire her, and Zola wouldn't even have to blame her if she had. The situation with Mbali was complicated, and in Oguhle's position, Zola didn't think she would have managed such cool, calm discussions about vendors and plotting delivery routes, not with the woman who had caught her boyfriend's eye.
So, I heard you went to go see the boss lady in hospital when she got hurt.
Kanyisa teased one morning. Zola flared her nostrils. Did Kanyisa also know about Mbali? Was that the office gossip? Who told you that? Zola snapped, not hiding her irritation.
Chill, Zola. What's your problem?
Kanyisa said defensively.
I heard it from Tulare. He got an email signed from both of you last Saturday. Anyway, I just wanted to know how badly she was hurt. It's really not like her to stay away from the office for so long, especially not when we're working on such a big project.
Sorry, Zola said. I have a lot on my mind. And yes, I did go see her. She asked me to come in to help her write some emails. She has some broken bones, which makes it impossible for her to drive or type. I'm sure she'll be back as soon as she can.
But Kanyisa was not one to be easily pacified. Shaking her head, she rolled her chair back to her desk and didn't speak to Zola for the rest of the day.
In fact, no one spoke to Zola on most days. She kept to herself, only speaking to her colleagues when she needed to. With everything else going on in her life, she hadn't got to know anyone in the office personally yet, and maybe it was for the best. It meant she could easily keep things to herself. The week ended with no sign of Oguhle. Zola made her way home, taking one taxi after another. But there was none of that Friday feeling. She was still anxious about the day she'd have to finally face Oguhle. Mbali had called Zola, and she had rejected his calls, determined to keep to her word. She wouldn't talk to him, and she wouldn't read his texts. She didn't want to hear from him until she could be sure that what he was saying was true.
Zola, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay? How's work going?
Nomsebenzi asked that evening, sitting herself down at the foot of Zola's bed. Zola shrugged. I'm just tired, Ma. We have this huge wedding expo coming up on Friday next week, and I just want to prove myself. She deftly omitted the part she knew her mother wouldn't want to hear. Nomsebenzi smiled with pride.
Okay. I know you can do anything you put your mind to. My girl will always impress.
And then, as if trying to seem comfortable with the idea, Nomsebenzi asked Zola about Gunther. Of course she didn't approve of him. Even as grown-up as Zola was now, it was hard for Nomsebenzi to accept that she was dating anyone, let alone a foreign man she had never physically met. On the rare occasions they had spoken on the phone, she had hardly understood a word he said, his accent English too thick for her ear.
I haven't heard you speaking to him in a long time. Is everything okay?
Nomsebenzi asked. No,
Actually, Zola said, shaking her head. We broke up. This was uncomfortable. Zola and her mother had never spoken about boys, and Zola had never actually introduced Gunter to her mother as her boyfriend. When Nomsebenzi had first seen him in the background of a video call, Zola had told her mother he was just a visiting friend and left her to piece the story together herself. Hey! Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Nomsebenzi didn't know what else to say on the matter. Long distance is hard, Mum, Zola said. Even though she didn't show it, she had always craved a close relationship with her mom. She'd wanted to be able to tell her everything, but found that Nomsebenzi overreacted to just about everything. Does it have anything to do with the man in the car from the other day? Nomsebenzi asked, smoothing Zola's bed. You mean my sugar daddy? Zola teased. She watched her mother's eyes widen and knew she'd gone too far. I'm joking, Mama. He's not my sugar daddy, and he's not even that much older than me. And I wouldn't say he was the reason for my breakup, although he did have something to do with it, Zola admitted. He helped me to see certain things about Gunter for myself. Nomsebenzi considered Zola for a short while as she tried to decide if she wanted to know more. Certain things like what? She finally asked. Like that I was the only one making an effort. I wanted to go back to Germany and Gunter wanted that too, but things didn't work out that way, right? Zola said. But when I asked Gunter if he would come to South Africa, he had all kinds of excuses, and he wasn't exactly original. His first objection was simply crime. He wasn't willing to think about it or even try to. Nomsebenzi's chest swelled with pride over her daughter's decision. It's never a good idea, my child, to chase a man, Nomsebenzi said. Your whole life can never revolve around somebody else, or you'll start acting crazy and doing things you don't understand. You should always love yourself more than you love anyone else, she said gently. Then, in a rare gesture, Nomsebenzi took Zola's hand and kissed her palm. Zola felt a warmth spread through her. Everything was going to be okay. Good night then, Sissy. I'll try to be quiet in the morning when I leave. You need your rest, Nomsebenzi said, walking out and turning off the lights. For the first time in days, Zola drifted into a peaceful sleep. Saturday morning, and Zola woke up smiling. Her mother had kept her promise and left quietly for work. Tobile had followed suit and gone to her Saturday classes without making any noise. And even Mbali had stopped calling and texting. Zola stretched. She would enjoy having the house to herself. A short while later, she was eating a big bowl of cereal in front of the TV in her pajamas. It was the kind of weekend she'd been craving. No plans, no checking her phone, no drama. But she had celebrated too soon. When her phone rang, the shrill sound immediately disturbed her newfound peace. Oguhle. Zola certainly didn't want to talk to Mbali's girlfriend, but she had to talk to the woman who signed her paychecks. Hi, Oguhle. How are you feeling? Oguhle's voice was low and somber. Honestly, Zola, I'm far from fine, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Zola felt herself go cold. It's nothing to do with work, and I want you to understand that this conversation is between two women, not between an employer and employee, Oguhle said in a slow, practiced monologue. We can't let this affect our work together, because honestly, as far as work is concerned, you've been my life raft. Oguhle's voice cracked, and Zola could tell she was only just holding it together. Zola felt sorry for Oguhle. They were both in a difficult position, both grateful for each other, and yet at odds at the same time.
Zola listened without speaking, giving Oguhle a chance to say what she needed to say. This is such a strange feeling. Oguhle laughed through what were now open tears. I mean, I'm so glad I met you, but at the same time, it's been a freaking nightmare. Oguhle laughed sadly again. Zola, you're really quiet. I'm just listening, Zola said. I'm trying to understand what all this is about. Even with Oguhle's assurance, it was hard for Zola to separate her working life from her personal life. If they hadn't worked together, none of this would have even mattered. Zola might not even have known Mbali already had a woman in his life.
That was another episode of the book The Thing with Zola, written by Zibu Sitole, read by Lerato Mvelase. The book is available online at www.penmacmillan.co.za and in all leading bookstores countrywide. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursdays on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Lerato Mvelase. Technical production, Wiseman Manmele, Nanda Koza, and Tato Mapuruma.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
O'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of April 2025. A very warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
We're equally concerned about the murder rate in our country currently, but also worried about easy availability of firearms, especially illegal firearms in our country.
South Africa's high crime levels under the spotlight at the inaugural police summit.
We are sometimes abused, we become stressed, sometimes we are raped, and the government does not take any action.
Here's what we ask for: free and fair education for all, better school buildings and facilities, books, school supplies, and technology.
And 300 child delegates representing 13 African countries are calling for free education, access to quality healthcare, and the right to feel safe and secure. And coming up in sport,
it's a long evening for football fans. Banyana in action. There's CAF Champions League and European Champions League. I'll preview that. And how much do tickets cost to watch the Masters?
I don't know.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah, okay. We'll wait for John to come and tell us how much we'd have to part with. John Kirika with that sports news in the second half of the show. In the meantime, let us know what's on your mind. 41391. That's the SMS line number, charged at R1.50 per SMS. You can also get in touch via X at SABC News_radio or send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082-692-3909. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Tuesday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, is the latest news with Kulufelo Tefo.
Thanks, Sakina. Top stories. The SAWA G20 leaders zooms in workplace gender inequality and concern over job losses as U.S. tariffs kick in tomorrow. Good afternoon. South Africa's Labour Minister Nomakhosazana Math says the recent drastic developments on the trade front have been disappointing. She was speaking at the opening of the second G20 Employment Working Group in Durban ahead of the G20 summit later this year. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump announced an increase in trade tariffs of up to 50% in some cases to tackle what he called trade imbalances. The session of the working group will focus on gender inequality in the workplace. Meth says recent world developments threatens shared prosperity worldwide.
We must also express our disillusionment with the drastic developments occurring on the trade front. These shifts threaten to become the primary drivers of economic stagnation and job losses, particularly in developing nations. These changes will erode economic resilience and dismantle employment opportunities for millions. This means that like-minded G20 countries must rise to the occasion and forge resilient labor market policies that protect jobs, safeguard economic stability, and ensure that our economies remain viable despite mounting global uncertainties.
The Citrus Growers Association of South Africa, CGA, has expressed growing concerns over job losses due to U.S. tariff increases that come into effect tomorrow. CEO of the Citrus Growers Association of South Africa, Boitshoko Ntshabele, says the increased tariffs will hurt South African citrus farms and rural communities. Ntshabele says the first citrus exports intended for the U.S. market will be packed this week.
One must think of the impact these tariffs will have on rural communities like Citrusdale. Exports to the United States makes the citrus industry in towns like it profitable. The truth is that many jobs are now being threatened.
COSATU in Limpopo has raised concerns over the rising number of child rape incidents in the country. This as the union is set to picket outside the Nebo Magistrates Court in support of a 17-year-old girl who was raped allegedly by her father. The suspect will appear in court this morning, or rather today. The union is expected to picket outside several courts this week in support of gender-based violence survivors. COSATU's Provincial Secretary, Hangwani Mashau.
We are just worried about the rising spate of these kinds of incidents, because it's not only this incident in James or Skukuni. There are a number of other gender-based violence incidents. As we protest today in Skukuni, we will be highlighting this rise in the number of gender-based violence to discourage communities from engaging in these acts of gender-based violence, but also to encourage victims to come forward and expose those that have committed acts of gender-based violence against them.
The Portfolio Committee on Community Safety in the Gauteng Legislature has asked Provincial Police Commissioner Tommy Mtobeni to provide it with a detailed progress report on investigations into taxi-related killings in Gauteng. This follows the fatal shooting of 3 officials from the Soweto Taxi Association, WATA, in Mfulo yesterday. According to the committee, 11 taxi operators were gunned down in Katlehong in March alone. Gauteng Safety Committee Chairperson Bandile Masuku.
The provincial government should also prioritize interventions that address the root cause of conflict, including engaging all stakeholders in the taxi industry to find a lasting solution. The committee further calls on the Department of Transport to mediate urgently between the rival association, ensuring that disputes over routes are resolved.
And finally, further afield, a report has found that the number of executions carried out around the world has reached its highest level in almost a decade. Human rights group Amnesty International said more than 1,500 people were put to death last year. It lists China as carrying out the most executions. The BBC's Frank Gardner reports.
China, says Amnesty International, does not release figures for the number of people it puts to death each year. But researchers at the human rights group say the figure for 2024 is in the thousands, making China the world's leading executioner. In their report just published, Iran, Iraq and Saudi Arabia together make up 91% of the remainder, with governments accused in some cases of using the death penalty to silence political dissent. The report lists Iran as executing 972 people last year. The United States executed 25.
The top story this hour, South Africa's Labour Minister Nkosazana Meth says the recent drastic developments on the trade front have been disappointing.